First of all, since this is being recorded, I want everybody to know I'm speaking to 600 people in the audience right now. It's awesome. First of all, thanks everybody for really caring enough about no kidding sustaining the fight. The last period of Quad A, and we're going to talk about sustainment. You're here because you want to be here. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm not going to go very long here, but first of all, I want to thank this panel. You got the best and brightest in this panel. With the exception of this person, it's the ugliest panel I've ever seen. But take a look at who we've got. We've got the Deputy the Commander of AMCOM, Kathy Dickens. We've got Colonel Wally Rugen, who runs all the aviation for G8, which is the resources. Colonel Mike Best was going to come. He could not be here for the G357. He and Colonel Lindsay are in a knife fight in a phone booth right now, and they couldn't break away here. But we've also have Dean Heitkamp. Colonel Heitkamp is the deputy to the commander of deputy commander to the USAS SOAC, Special Operations Aviation Command. And very, very important position here that's going to give us a little discussion about sustaining the special ops group and things we need to think about. And of course, the absolute underbelly, and I say this with great respect, of everything that goes on in sustainment for Army aviation, and that's our Corpus Christi Army Depot Commander, Colonel Garner Pogue. Without this group, you cannot sustain the fight. And it's just that simple. And so without that, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk for about 8 minutes here, and then turn it over to each person. Will talk for about 8 minutes. Anytime you want to bring up something or bring up a question, unless you're Colonel or General Steve Munt, who asked too many questions at every one of the panels before this, please feel free, raise your hand, come on up and let's talk. I'd like it to be a discussion. Okay, and it's what we hope to bring up here are thoughts and things that we need to consider on sustainment here, so we can then take those thoughts and things that need to be considered and make sure that we get them right back into the six-pack. Okay, that's our aviation leaders here to help challenge them and make sure that they recognize the challenges going forward here. So your input and thoughts are very important, just as important as the panel. And I thank the last few who came in, so that now absolutely the audience at least has doubled the number of people who are actually going to be talking. Next slide. Here's what I want to talk about. So we're saying if what we got to talk about is sustaining the fleet in a resourced environment here, first thing we need to talk about, what is the state of the fleet? What does it look like right now? And what I'd like to do is talk about just the recency of the last 14 years. If you think about what's occurred with our fleet, number one, we've had high op tempo. There's not a single aircraft fleet that we have that hasn't approached 100 hours per aircraft per month at one point or another. And so our op tempo's been high. What about our supply? Our supply when we started, and what did our National Inventory Control Point look like when the war started? It was abysmal. It was not good. We were gaining the efficiencies of the piece as it broke out. But in the last 15 years, from pumping it with what we did down at Corpus Christi to actually sustaining it, the supply health has actually been good. We've exceeded the non-mission capable supply standards in a combat zone for both Iraq and Afghanistan and special ops around the world, much higher than what the stated readiness rates were for supply. So we've been blessed with that. We were blessed with resetting our aircraft. That's a good thing, because as we flew them high, we actually have come back and reset those aircraft. Make no mistake about it, this is not zero timing these aircraft, because in some cases we're taking the mods and we're patching over the top of patches that we did on our aircraft here for the MECs just to keep the aircraft back in the flight. But we did reset the aircraft. That was very powerful. The health of our aircraft fleet is known. Why? Because we have CBM on our major platforms here, condition-based maintenance, which helps you understand what the tolerances are for both torques, temperatures, pressures, and it helps you understand the vibration of your aircraft. Instead of just having a sense for it, we actually know what the condition of our aircraft are, which is exceptionally important, and actually documented that readiness rates were up on those aircraft that had CBM for those units that deployed, and you had less number of incidents where you had aircraft that could not deploy for a mission due to maintenance. Tail number transparency drove down the cost. As you guys recall, it didn't matter if you had 101st or the 82nd or first cav patch on your aircraft. At the end of the day, we would take an aircraft from Germany, send it to Hawaii. We'd take some aircraft from Hawaii, send them to Riley. Wherever we needed to do that to help sustain the fleet, we did it. The biggest concern we had, as some of our predecessors have always said, we don't need rent an airplane, because we had to take ownership of our aircraft. That's what you do to make sure your aircraft fly well. Well, at the end of the day, we were able to take those aircraft, move them around the battlefield, drive down the cost, and at the same time, what was wonderful is that our soldiers took, wherever the aircraft came from, they took it as their own aircraft, put their arms around it, and loved that aircraft and made it their own. And that bonding that occurred with the crew chiefs to actually sustain the fleet was very important while we were able to move the aircraft around, which drove down the cost. Good cost reduction initiatives did occur. The performance-based logistics programs that happened at Corpus Christi are what allowed the Army to come out of having zero balance on their shelves to drive readiness for performance-based logistics, talking with Honeywell and GE and Sikorsky and some of those PBLs that were very, very important. This person over here called Kathy Dickens led the effort to put in logistics modernization program. It was a SAP owned system here that CSC was responsible for, that we actually integrated, and for the first time we actually can see ourselves down at Corpus Christi and at AMCOM in a way that you never could see yourself before. Lots of things that happened that drive down the cost. Obsolescence, some of you don't know, there was lots of initiatives going on for obsolescence where the PMs had the top 15 drivers of those things that were holding our aircraft down, and Kathy led the effort with AMRDEC to make sure that obsolescence was taken care of and get rid of some of those things that were out there. I mentioned condition-based maintenance. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but it helps us understand the health of the aircraft. When you think about what does our fleet look like today, unbelievable what PO Aviation has done with G3, 5, 7, with G8, with the total team that surrounds our program managers here. Think about what you have. For age 64s, we have new airframes. All the Delta models that we had that we flew 100 hours per aircraft per month, when you think about where we're going forward, brand new airframes, okay? Because when we converted from the Deltas to the Echoes, some of you don't know, we replaced those airframes. Very, very important for the best attack helicopter in the world to have a new airframe going forward. UH-60M model, okay, A's and L's going away. Got the M models coming in. Very, very, very important for what that aircraft provides to us. And you think about the F model, new airframe. So as we think about what we did, fight the fight for a long period of time, coming out of the fight, you got Echoes, Mikes, and Foxes, something we really need to, I would tell you, need to pat on the back to those that were involved in the acquisition strategy to come up with that to make it happen. And I think it's a message that needs to continue to be pushed. Question you have going forward, okay, you got new airframes. What does the OCOF look like? What does the working capital fund look like? We know where we were in 2001. The main things we need to consider is, what does the working capital fund look like in 16, 17, 18, 19? Because what we don't want to do is get to where we were before. We had, quote, holes in our yard where we had zero balance on our shelves. We can't afford to have that happen again. And so that's to me, that's one of the major issues we need to think about moving forward. And right now, ARI, don't know exactly. We have a plan. We're executing ARI, but we know there's some political issues going on there. The idea is predictability of funding, predictability of a plan for an aircraft modernization, and where we're going forward. We need to continue, and the decisions need to be made so there can be predictability moving forward. The biggest thing that I've seen in the times that I was in the Army, and what I'm seeing even more now, is the less predictability you have, the more it's going to cost you. It costs you in terms of readiness, it costs you in terms of funding, it costs you in terms of predictability. And although I'm not into the CLS side as much as people think that we are in the company I'm with now, the fact that we don't have contracts for buying parts that go out to 10 years, I think is driving us into a position where the suppliers, the second tier and third tier suppliers, don't have predictability or promise of a contract to go out and buy some of the long lead items they need. Long lead items, if you don't buy them now, if you have to buy them at the very end, it's going to cost you a higher price. You need to think your way through that. Next slide. Okay, there's two things I do want to talk about for future challenge before I turn it over to Kathy and some of the other smarter people here is I think we're still over maintaining our aircraft. Why do I say that? We have information. If you go back to look at how is scheduled maintenance, how do we determine what's 500-hour inspection? How do we determine a 250? How do we determine intermediate scheduled maintenance? How do we determine phase maintenance? It's based on the number of hours an aircraft flies. The number of hours an aircraft flies is when you go back and talk to AED and you go back to the manufacturer, they determine the scheduled maintenance based on those hours. Well, what makes up an hour of an aircraft? What did you assume when you said that Black Hawk was going to fly an hour? What was the flight parameter? Was it straight and level? No. When you go back and talk to the engineers, they'll tell you they took the 6 highest parameters of what that aircraft would possibly enter into, and that's what makes up every 10 minutes of an hour, every 10 seconds of a minute. So if you don't think your aircraft's been hovering backwards for 10 minutes, hovering sideways out for 10 minutes, hovering sideways out of ground effect, or if you don't think that flying at 10,000 feet at max gross weight is what your aircraft flies every day, and yet you're assuming that scheduled maintenance is based on that, maybe you can extend your scheduled maintenance out. Maybe you can look at your TBOs. Well, you got to know, because when you go back and ask the engineers, they'll tell you, we didn't know what the aircraft flight regime would be. You got condition-based maintenance. What is that? That's something that determines what your flight regime is. So what am I saying in terms of automobiles? We're always driving in the city, hard-driven conditions. We're not maintaining that aircraft in a way where it's actually based on how it's flying. Now, engineers will tell you they need a bazillion hours of data to determine that. I don't think you need a bazillion, you probably need a trillion hours. I don't think you need a trillion, you probably need a billion. I don't know what the number is, but it's something less than what they'll tell you. And we have an awful lot of information that helps us determine it, because if you go back and take a look at a phase maintenance on a Black Hawk used to be $400,000. If you could move it from 250 or 500 hours to 750, all of a sudden you've driven your costs out. You've driven your costs down 33%. Think about what that number is with the number of phases that are done on an aircraft over a long period of time. That's big money. I would also tell you the same thing goes on for the second bullet for TBOs. Our dynamic components, most of them don't make it to TBO, the finite life. We have to replace them early. Why do you have to replace them early? Nicks, dents, scratches, corrosion. If we could figure out a way to just meet our TBOs that we have today, just meet the TBOs, that's big bucks. That drives down your cost significantly, orders of magnitude. Think your way through that. So why don't we do it? Well, it takes, if you want to go and replace a transmission, you got to have RDTE, you got to have APA, and you got to have OMA dollars. You got to budget for it. It's not sexy to walk into the door and do that. I would submit to you, if you can actually take it on and say, you can reduce my OMA dollars in 5 years if you give me money up front, you could probably get somebody to come in and help you with that and do that. What I would tell you is that's what needs to sell. If you want to drive down the cost of an aircraft for its life cycle, we know 70% of all costs is based on the sustainment. That's where you can get it. So when you think your way through about sustaining the force in a resource-constrained environment, from Myles's view, other than the great maintenance and great supply that these folks bring every single day and that our soldiers do every single day, if you want to reduce the burden, those are the 2 birds you need to jump up and shoot down. So with that, that's my thoughts. What I'd like to do is turn it over to the much more articulate Kathy Dickens, who can actually tell you what's going on.
Thank you, sir. I agree with you. You hit on some great points. Talking about condition-based maintenance, we have a lot of information. We have a lot of data, and I think we're now ready to move to the next level. So what we really have to do is we have to understand how to use that data. That's really the challenge right now. How do we take the data and really drive to a different TBO so that we can extend the TBO? How do we make sure that our soldiers in the field understand what the data actually means? So right now, what we have going on is we actually have a partnership with the PMs and the PEO, between AMCOM, Fort Ruckle, PMs and the PEOs, the PMs, so that we are looking at how do we take this to the next level, because we've gathered a lot of data, gathered a lot of information. Now we've got to really go to that next level and utilize it. So we've pulled that together. We're writing some policy changes, recommending some policy changes, and looking at how we can really maximize the use of the data. The other thing that I think we need to look at in the future is one of the challenges that we actually have, and this is this is something that really bothered General Richardson. He actually had to extend the TBO that we had pulled down, and the reason he had to extend the TBO was because we couldn't get the data from the aircraft on one of our Apache parts. And the reason we could not is because we've made it very difficult for our soldiers. They actually have to take a thumb drive, got to find a system that is off the network. They've got to be able to plug it in. They've got to download that data. Now, you know, if you look at commercial airlines and you look at that consistent feed of the information that comes in to each of the different suppliers, and it goes to the right place at the right time, that's really the future. That's where we want to go. How do we make sure that we eliminate the soldier burden of sending data in a way that is a burden on them? And so I think, you know, that's a challenge, because all the aircraft have slightly different system right now for CBM. But I don't think it's impossible. I mean, because when you look at, I don't think you have to go and change all the systems. I think you have to understand what could, and I'm not an IT expert, but something that would sit on top of those systems and allow a data feed that would be that could come in without significantly changing the systems on the aircraft, but rather take the information and send it to the right people that need it, that can use the data for the future. And I think that's something that we want to look at, that we need to look at. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm sure that we've got a lot of smart people that can figure that out. And then you talked about what is the future of supply chain. I think one of the challenges that we're going to have with supply chain, when you go back and you look at where we were at before we actually began the war, we were in really bad shape. A lot of people do not realize it, but when we went in, we didn't have one engine on the shelf. That's pretty bad. That is pretty bad. We didn't have, you know, we had over 400 items that were critical. The challenge that we will have going forward is we have a lot of inventory right now. I will tell you that we have gone from $1 billion worth of inventory in Army Aviation to $7 billion. So we're very healthy, very healthy. But now we've got to maintain that inventory. We've got to deal with corrosion. We've got to make sure that we know that we've got the right inventory. And then we've got to keep a warm supplier base. And that's going to be a challenge with our depot and our commercial suppliers, that we do not, and those second, third, and fourth tier suppliers, that we don't end up closing them down. Because that's really what happened. When we went in before the war, what we found out is we had a lot of suppliers that were no longer available. And so the reason it took 2-3 years to become healthy again, I shouldn't say healthy. It actually probably took about 6 years for us to become healthy. It took about 3 years for us to really start seeing a lot of the items coming in. And the reason is because we closed down supply lines. So what we have to do, I think, is work very closely with industry, look at the second, third, and fourth tier suppliers, and make sure that we maintain a minimum level so that they can stay in business. PBLs, you talked about PBLs. I think the opportunity in the future is selecting the right items that we can invest in on our performance-based logistics contracts, because that is actually a way that we can gain reliability improvements. Now, it's not a change to the performance envelope, but you can, industry is incentivized to actually increase the reliability of the parts because the demand signal goes down. And for them, that's really the way that they are able to maximize, maximize their profit levels on that contract, is to decrease the demand signal. So we've got to continue to invest smartly with the right items on PBLs. And And then I think really maximizing our use of technology. Right now we are really just moving into the use of logistics modernization program. I'm sure Colonel Pogue's going to talk to you a little bit about that and what that really means for our depot. What it means inside of AMCOM is I will tell you that our demand forecast is no longer looking backwards. What it really means is we're looking not at what are the demands that have been coming in from the field for the last 5 years. We're actually looking at where are you at today, what's the flying hour program, what's the what's the environment you're flying in, and we can quickly adjust when we look and we see you're flying different op tempo or different environment, and we reset our demand plan. That's very powerful in terms of cost. We've seen a lot of cost reduction. I don't have the number with me. I don't have the chart that shows the reduction in the cost per flight hour, but between the new modernized aircraft and all of the investments that we've made in corrosion prevention, in the appropriate use of PBLs, in reliability improvements, the cost per flight hour of our aircraft it's significantly decreased, and it's very impressive. But if we're going to maintain that, we have to continue to have the investments up front that will allow us to do that. So those are just a few of my thoughts and a few of the things that we've been focused on in AMCOM.
Okay, a little kind of the opposite side of the coin is just the modernization piece. As I entered the building last summer, we were working very strenuously on LERA 17, which is our 30-year strategy. That strategy is across the aviation enterprise, not only socialized but staffed very rigorously. And so, we're looking at sustainment in that. And obviously, from my foxhole on the modernization, the biggest fleet that we deal with and the most attention we get is in the Black Hawk fleet. It's 2,135 aircraft. Of those, and we've attained that acquisition objective, of those, we still have over 550 that are Alpha model UH-60s. And so getting after getting those divested and out of the fleet is a primary concern, and we're doing that in two ways. New build Mike models, which they're in their multi-year 8 contract. We hope to be successful in a multi-year 9 contract, and those multi-year contracts give that predictability that General Myles was talking about. And so what we see from, again, the checkbook is significant savings. The rule of thumb is over 10%, and so we plow that back into more airframes and accelerate the modernization. So multi-year 9, we're hoping to see that happen here 17 to 21. The second aspect of Black Hawk modernization is obviously the recap, and I won't steal too much of Garner's thunder, but again, we have A to L, which sunsets in 2018, and then we have the Lima model to Victor model, and again, those are critical modernization that we're, again, committed to investing in to keep our Black Hawk fleet, the largest fleet, modernized and help with that sustainment piece. On the Apache, the Apache program has not seen the stability with the budget cuts that we experienced since PB-12. So, the Chinook and the Black Hawk were covered down with multi-years, and so the flexibility in the program to give ground was mostly burdened by Apache. So what we're seeing is we head into the Apache, Echo model Apache's first multi-years, giving it that stability, again, to get after sustainment so we can modernize quicker, we can get that multi-year savings and plow it back into more aircraft. Also, the wisdom of those that went before, we didn't ask for a perfect solution with the Echo model. So it's incrementally developed. We're still touching the aircraft, and so some folks are shocked that there's some obsolescence issues in a remanned aircraft, and I think that was very smart business. If we look for a perfect solution, it's going to take too long to get there. And so we constantly go back, get after the obsolescence during program reviews and reinvest in, versions of Apache Echo models that are better and better and better. And I think, again, that gets after the sustainment piece. And AMCOM, has a big vote in that. And so during our six-pack calls and during the staffing in the enterprise, we're hearing back, so we have a solution that, is helping the enterprise. On the Chinook, it's probably our newest airframe except for the G models. And during the war, for all the right reasons, we lost about 4,200 pounds of our key performance parameter. So a lot of aircraft survivability equipment went on that aircraft to do the right thing, to make sure we were survivable. And now we want to buy that back with the Block 2 program. But again, we're not going about it, in an uninformed way. That Block 2 is also going to be our recap. And so it's important. Again, I won't steal Dean's thunder, but the G model is important to us as well. That is probably the oldest tiredest fleet that we have in the Army. And as we look at it, we have some of them that are over 12,000 hours on the airframe, and we have one that was the number 8 prototype built in 1958, still flying. So it's incredible. What a great airframe, but something we need to get after. And so when we look at the Block 2 program and eventually, hopefully, the Block 3, again, as an equipper, I'm seeing just a great bang for the buck, because in the 30s, our investment in the Chinook, which will be an incredible 54,000-pound aircraft, is still a better deal than the Osprey and the Kilo Model 53 in today's dollars. So I think, again, when you look at the Chinook, great thing. And the last thing I'll say about the Chinook, and what I've used as kind of the marketing in the building, is it's a 100-year aircraft. So we started building these in 1960, and they're going to be in service in 2060. And so when you talk about the kind of the specter of sustainment that hangs over that, we have to make sure we're very thoughtful in how we touch this aircraft and keep it modernized, so we don't just put a massive burden back on the SS PEG or the OMA guys. We're working hard on fixed wing, so future utility aircraft. We see and hear, and it competes well. We got 4 aircraft over 35 years of useful economic life. Probably well over 40 aircraft that are over 25 years of useful economic life, and that sells well in the building. And so future utility aircraft is competing well. And I was worried about that, as we headed into just staffing the Palm and that kind of thing. So it's resonating, and we do bring our sustainers in to talk about some of those issues. And we're also, lastly, very quickly looking at UAS. These are not throwaway systems. So, the Shadow Victor II is getting quite a nice workover, and we're, making sure that we have a plan within our LIRA to look at Gray Eagle and some of our other systems. And the last thing is just ITEP. ITEP is an Army priority, and again, industry is giving us some promising data on the ITEP, and again, we're looking forward to that 25% less sustainment cost as we look at putting a new engine in over 3,000 platforms. And so it's a smart investment. I think everyone's focused on not only the power increase, but also the sustainment and fuel savings there. And with that, I'll pass it off to Dean.
All right, well, good afternoon. General Myles asked me to talk about this challenge from the soft perspective. And so what I'd like to do is, to give you a little context, how I approach this is, I think of resourcing as a triangle. The 3 sides of the triangle are capability, capacity, and readiness. And in the past, the past decade, the triangle was full of dollars. And in fact, there were so many dollars that we were able to expand the triangle. But now we're going into this fiscally constrained environment to where the dollars don't fill the triangle anymore, so we're faced with a couple of choices. One, we can shorten one of the sides of the triangle, or we can shrink the entire triangle to make sure we've got the dollars to satisfy capacity, capability, and readiness. So what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about those challenges in terms of that triangle. And so the first one that I'll throw out at you is unique requirements drive unique solutions. And that really gets to the capability side of the triangle. When you look at where the regiment started, roughly 35 years ago, it was very much a common Army aircraft. So a CH-47 Alpha, a UH-60 Alpha, an OH-6 at that time, all aircraft that belonged in the Army inventory, parts were pretty common. And then we became increasingly divergent from the rest of Army aviation. Got to about the 1995 timeframe, we had the MH-60 Kilo, the MH-60 Echo, the AH and MH-6 Juliet, which in many cases were very divergent from what was in the Army inventory. So that brings up the first challenge that we face and will continue to face is the more divergent we become, the less commonality we have with Army programs of record or joint programs of record. We also have the challenge of low-density fleets. We just recently became the proud owners of 7 C-27Js. So you think about a fleet that size, what kind of buying power do you have when you're trying to find spares and repair parts? And so all of our fleets, if we're divergent, low density, you don't have the buying power, the demand analysis is tough. When do you drop the contract to replace a certain, to get a certain repair part put on the shelf? How many do you need? How many do you need for 51 aircraft of a certain type? So that's a challenge that we'll continue to face, and I would say we're on a path right now to be more convergent with the Army, especially with the Block 2 efforts. That will make us very convergent, and that will help us out with the commonality challenge. The other piece that we have, and Wally talked about it, is the challenge of aging fleets. So you look at the Chinook, and like he said, we've got, I think we have 6 or 9 right now that exceed the economic useful life definition that DOD has. The Army will divest itself of the CH-47 Delta by 2018, yet we'll be flying these things for many, many years after that. So there's the challenge of, is the availability of parts out there, the structural members. We're fortunate right now that CCAD still has, a lot of the repair criteria, has the knowledge and the talent to do that. But if we continue to keep those aircraft out for a long period of time, will that repair capability and the availability of those structural components still be in existence 10 years from now? And there's also with the unique requirements is the demand for the ability to have the comparative advantage over adversaries, which drives rapid technology insertion back into the force. And with that technology insertion comes some additional challenges. So you hang new technology on the aircraft, whether it's composites, new black boxes. Do you have the talent and the education within your maintenance force? Do they know how to make those repairs? Do they have the repair criteria? Are they authorized to make the repair? Do you have the diagnostic equipment to be able to figure out and troubleshoot what is this new black box telling you, or what's it doing wrong? And then what is the cost of integrated solutions? Again, going back 35 years ago, we would hang different federated systems on the aircraft. And so if one of those systems went bad or we wanted to upgrade it, it was very low cost. But as we've integrated it over time, and now you want to upgrade that, what other software do you have to change on the aircraft? Or if you change out an antenna, what other system might you disrupt? And so all that has to be taken into consideration. And so as we try to put the technology into the aircraft and stay ahead of our adversaries in a fiscal and constrained environment, this is going to become even more complex. And so that's the first side of the triangle, which is the capability. The second one that I would bring up is, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, is understanding and influencing the total cost of ownership. And that really gets to the readiness side of the resourcing triangle. So do we understand all the costs that go into operating an air fleet? Ms. Hughes said it, 70% of a weapons system is really in the sustainment costs. We manage our fleets. We have two basic budget piles, the flying hour program and what we call the FOS budget, the Flight Operations Sustainment Budget. The flying hour piece is For most part, it's the variable cost. We know pretty well what it costs to operate an aircraft by the hour. But then there's all those indirect and fixed costs that are on the flight operations sustainment side of the house. So, a contract field team contract, that whether you fly 10,000 hours or you fly 50,000 hours, you've paid for that contract for a year and you own it. And so when you get in the year of execution and the budgeteers want to take the money back from you, guess what? That cost is fixed. You can't influence that one anymore. So the only thing you can do is look at other things, and it puts pressure on the other sustainment activities that you need to sustain that fleet. But do we understand all those relationships? Do we understand, and can we integrate the cost avoidance back into the budget model to sustain the fleet? So if I take an FSR, if I go get an FSR for $400,000 a year, and that FSR is successful at $2 million in cost avoidance, does that get wrapped back up into the budget? But I'll tell you, the cost of the FSR is in the budget, and when you're looking at cuts, folks will say, well, let's get rid of that. We can save $400,000 here, but what they don't know is you just signed up for another $2 million bill that you could have avoided because that's what we had been doing. And so we've got to understand that as we go forward and making sure all of our leadership knows as we're constrained by the dollars, saving $400,000 may cost you $2 million. And do you understand that? And then that brings us into the influence piece. So how, if we understand the whole total cost of ownership, can we influence, and where do we influence it? Kathy talked about it a little bit. General Myles talked about it. Understanding what the aircraft is telling us, the integrated health monitoring systems on the aircraft. It's more than just the vibrations. It's everything that we're getting out of it. And can we use that data then to make the predictive analysis? Do we repair the component? Do we remove the component? Can we extend the TBO on the component so we get the time on wing so that we can reduce these costs? Do we have the systems to do the predictive analysis so we can do predictive maintenance? And then can we educate the force, the maintainers, the leaders, the users, so that they know what the data is telling them, and can we integrate all those other streams of data so not only do we know that the aircraft had this vibrations, but it's been flying this many hours under this gross weight in these kind of conditions, so you really know, 10,000 hours at Fort Campbell is not as detrimental to the aircraft as maybe 10,000 hours in Afghanistan at 8,000 feet max gross weight. So can we get all of that integrated in the system and then integrate that in our component TBOs? And then the last piece of the triangle that I would mention is inventory management for a global force. So our challenge that we have now, of course, again, if you look at the national security strategy all the way down through SOCOM, USASOC, everybody has embarked on a strategy of low footprint, distributed operations. And so, Mike Hertzendorf mentioned yesterday, a couple weeks ago, we had aircraft in Afghanistan, aircraft in Iraq, aircraft in South Korea, aircraft in South America, aircraft in 5 different places in the United States, all different airframes, different mixtures, all in different environments. So our strategy in the past was robust sparing and robust repair parts. You can't do that in a fiscally constrained environment. So who gets the part? Where do you put it? If I can only afford to buy 3 spares, do I park one at Fort Lewis, one at Savannah, and one at Fort Campbell? Or do I put them both, put one of them over in Afghanistan? Do I understand the demand analysis well enough, and do I have the integrated data coming off the aircraft so I can predict when to ship that part to Afghanistan or Iraq instead of buying a whole bunch of them? We used to have a saying on the compound, piles of parts. Again, when there's plenty of money, you just buy lots of parts. Every good maintenance officer, has many parts. They put them all over the place because they never want to be the person who's the reason why the mission didn't go. We're not going to be able to do that in a fiscally constrained environment. Do we have the total asset visibility? Do we have accurate component repair velocity? So if I know the amount of time it's going to take to ship the component to a repair facility, how long it's going to take it to get repaired and brought back to me, again, that can factor into how many parts do I put on the shelf. And then the last thing is, do we have the right tools, system, and leaders to manage this process? Because again, in a fiscally constrained environment, those folks become more important than ever to make those judgment calls. So with that, I'll turn it over to Garner.
Thanks, Dean. Appreciate that very much. Garner Pogue, I'm your Corpus Christi Army Depot Commander. Often described as a soft underbelly of Army aviation. Prefer to think of ourselves at Corpus as the backstop. So at the end of the road, after all the pass back happens for sustainment, if it's not done at Corpus Christi, then Corpus Christi, with our support at AMCOM, will pay someone to do it, literally. So there's if it can't be done at the plant, which is a very rare, to include provisioning. Oftentimes at the end of all the provisioning cycles, either with a contract or a credit card purchase, local purchase, purchasing around the world actually, we'll find a way to make that happen. We support the field principally by managing our unit funded costs for components. And we do that by trying to manage our overhead, to try to manage our labor force, to try to manage the supply chain, to be truly better, faster, and cost effective, operating as a nonprofit, to meet the schedule, coordinate with the customer, which is you, at a cost that's affordable. So we want to make sure that we're managing that, and we're actively managing that. We're actively trying to posture the depot for the future with new technology, investments in technology, investments in the plant itself, investments in our public-private partnerships to drive cost effectiveness and efficiencies into the plant. And it certainly is a challenge. So quality and schedule, a strategic imperative, program management, and thereby cost, strategic imperative, supported by our principal supporting efforts, which are our LMP journey and automating the shop floor, which will, for the first time ever, give us a true integrated master schedule at the plant to drive in more efficiencies and more cost effectiveness and audit readiness, being ready and auditable, making sure that we have that built into our program management, so that truly not only can we look in at ourselves at the plant, but at AMCOM and AMC and really across the Army through LMP, looking into even down to the machine, down to the individual artisans, where efficiencies can be drilled in, but also being audit ready and making sure that we're spending money appropriately and managing that. I know there's not a lot of time left, and we got about 7 minutes left, and we certainly want to get to any questions that are out there. But I will say that the workforce down in South Texas at Corpus Christi is incredibly dedicated. We are seeing folks that don't even own cell phones embracing shop floor automation, which is not just surprising but refreshing to see folks that don't own cell phones, that don't own computers at their home, embracing shop floor automation, learning it, and they're doing it because they know they're only an arm's length away from the fight. And we also, as soldiers from the field, come and train at the plant, and we do that all the time, and we have a lot of opportunities for soldiers to come train at the plant. Those soldiers interacting with our artisans is what makes them remember that they are that close to the fight, and we're here to support you. So whether it's a depot field team coming forward, whether behind the scenes we're managing that with our chain of command, managing our costs and unit funded costs and driving efficiencies and new technologies into the plant. That's why we're there and certainly ready to support. And with that, sir, unless you want to take some questions.
Yeah, one comment about Corpus. One thing I'd love to see when we talk about private-public partnerships, some of the constraints seem to be, and I didn't realize it then, but I do now, that the amount of G&A and overhead, if you will, or the indirect cost that you have to charge is not the same as what's charged out here. And if there was a way to get after what you have a burden on your workforce, to go back and look at the policies, I think we might find Corpus being used a lot more in industry than it is now. And I didn't know that till I got out here on the dark side, if you will. You know?
I can address that. So even with the fully burdened overhead of the plant, which is the fixed cost, maintenance, the electric bill at Corpus Christi is $1 million a month. So even with all those fixed costs of operating the plant, we still are at a very competitive rate, extremely competitive. But there is a move afoot across the organic industrial base, and it's an AMC initiative, sir, to do just that, which is pull out how we charge the fixed costs, because under Title 10 we have to exist, to pull those fixed costs out to really drive those rates down, because we are a nonprofit and we're able to do that. And AMC is looking hard at that effort, and that move is afoot. But chances that will not affect 16 unless, but looking potentially as early as 17, we may see some benefits of how we charge that.
Yeah, it's good. Also, I called it the soft underbelly of that was when Joe Dunaway commanded Corpus. Now it's a 6-pack with Garner. So that's what the Corpus is. How's that? Is that a good recovery? All right. So I know you got tons of questions. Let's open it up here for any questions, discussions. Anybody? Yes, Jack Dotter, at my own peril. Nice bow tie.
This question's for Diamond Jim. And yes, sir, Colonel Pogue, I know everybody's nickname. Okay, a couple of years ago, we had a wonderful triangle of officers, aviation officers, in the Alabama area. Major General Mangum, Major General Myles, Brigadier General Crosby. Your slide alludes to we are over-maintaining our aircraft.
Right.
We're doing that based upon the requirements from AED.
Yes.
Okay, good example, and this is a very small example. Fry's bolts, Fry's bar bolts, 2 of them go in the ceiling. For 20 years, you pulled the bolt down, pulled the Fry's bar down, did an inspection, put the Fry's bar bolts back up in. 20 years of experience. An engineer at AED, by analysis, said, I can't ensure that you're doing the dry lube install on that bolt when it goes back up. Therefore, you've got to change the barrel nuts. That's a tough job. That adds time. Now, that's one little thing. Fuel cell integrity checks. We had Blackhawks from 1978 to 1990. If you had a bad fuel line, you pulled the bad fuel line off and replaced it, doing proper maintenance. Now you break a fuel cell or fuel system, fuel integrity checks are required. Get out the magnometer, get out the air pump, fill it up, let it sit, make sure you don't have a PSI drop. We had Blackhawks from 78 to 99, we didn't do that. So I guess my question is, yeah, I recognize that you put up here, we're over-maintaining my aircraft. I guess it's why can't you guys who are at the top of aviation leadership, okay, I'll say it, corral AED?
Yeah. So I think probably the best thing to raise it up a level, because that's where you're talking about a systemic issue of interaction and interface with the customer in terms of what's driving us nuts. You know, we tried to do the walk, where we bring the Brigade Aviation Maintenance Officers to the walk, Worldwide Aviation Logistics Conference, to have that discussion, and it has helped solve some things. But I would submit most likely because of the uniqueness of AED working for AMRDEC not working for AMCOM, AMRDEC not working for PEO Aviation, causes this seam that forces you to put together this coalition, if you will, or policies that forces you to talk. And I don't, you know, as you bring it up, Jack, if I known then what I know now, I probably would have said, let's have a session with AED and the BAMOs and AMRDEC to force that discussion that comes up with I don't know if you've added to a walk or you add it somewhere else, that forces that discussion that allows our BAMOs to go back and our ASB commanders to go back and talk about those scheduled maintenance or those issues that it comes up over time to do that. I mean, it seems like that's what you got to do. I don't know. Kathy?
I think one thing, we have fairly new leadership in AED, Jeff Langout. And I will tell you that Jeff is all about going back and trying to relook at how they are doing business, and he's very open to that. Now I think we have to get him in with the right people and his folks in with the right people to make those decisions. Everybody's a little cautious. There's no doubt about that because we don't want to make a mistake. And but I think you bring up a good point, and I continue to hear that everywhere we go that we need to relook at that. So I think that's an issue we can take on. Get Jeff and his folks in the room with the right people to start making some of those decisions.
To your point, I think she's right. I think you're right. I mean, with the leadership that you got with Jeff, I think he's willing to do it. I just don't think we've thought that how do we put a process in place to enable Jeff to reach out in a meaningful way. 1,000, 1,500 people, whatever's in AED now, that's a lot of people.
just to dovetail into that, I mean, we give back an awful lot of maintenance, though, that has nothing to do with Army engineering. I mean, we have folks in the field, and I'm guilty as a multiple-time AVUM and AVIM and ASB commander. You know, we give back a lot of maintenance. We pull components early because an airplane's in phase, or some other unscheduled maintenance is being done on the airplane because it only has 80 hours left and won't make it to the next phase. We dump aircraft into phase early and give back all those hours. How many thousands and hundreds of thousands of hours have we given back of bank time because it was bank time? How many aircraft have we thrown in to phase as soon as we got deployed just because we had the contract teams ready and we were nervous about bank time and mission availability? And how do we do phase maintenance and how we look at that? So I think the engineering challenges as we move to the future really is how do we transition more to an industry standard of optimizing and maximizing time on wing? How do we match our inspection schedules to meet our mission schedules? Because there's an awful lot of maintenance being given back there, and that's within our control. We don't need engineers to help us with that.
Any other questions? All right, so just as a wrap up, a lot of people working hard in a lot of areas in aviation maintenance, whether it's our soldiers on the flight line, our BAMOs that are interacting with AMCOM, or whether it's this team of the six-pack that's working the strategic levels. Lots of people working hard. You know, I would still encourage us to go back and look at the two basic things that I talked about up there. First one being, you know, we're working our soldiers a lot harder than we have to because we are, in my opinion, penalizing our soldiers because the assumption we're making is those aircraft are flying in the worst possible flight regimes that has been known to man. We're not doing that. We're not flying those aircraft like that. When we do, we should do the scheduled maintenance where we're doing now. We need to take on those issues on scheduled maintenance that reduces the burden on our soldiers and absolutely reduces the cost. And we've got the data. And so I don't know the best way to tie it all together. Normally, you just lock them all in a room, turn up the heat, and don't feed them. You'll get a solution. But something needs to occur to help us get it to the next hurdle, to use this data in a more meaningful way to drive down costs and take care of our soldiers a little bit more. Same thing with the TBOs. Okay. I don't know if we should give you guys a medal or actually feed you for staying this long here, but you stayed through the last iteration of Quad A prior to Martina McBride. So I would like to thank the panel for volunteering to actually provide us your information. I wrote all the data down. The intent is to provide it back to the leadership of the Army to talk about the things that you may want to consider moving forward. So thanks. Let's give a round of applause for our panel here. Thank you. Good job. And give yourselves your own round of applause for staying for the last panel. All right.